Hello, welcome back. We are in Numbers chapter 31, and we have almost finished the book of Numbers. There's only 36 chapters, uh, but 33, 34, 35, and 36 are pretty small, so that'll probably just be a couple of videos. But we're almost done with Numbers, and the really cool part about that is now you've seen some of the patterns and principles from Genesis and Exodus and Leviticus start to expand in Numbers. And when we get into Deuteronomy and what some call the Sermon on the Mount for the Old Testament by Moses is going to expound on that even more. And I think just bring us to a whole new level of understanding of who God is. Because the main reason to study all of this, I've heard so many comments about, why does this matter to Christians if this is this and this is this? The best reason to study the whole Bible, start to finish, is our goal is to learn how to love God. That's the overarching goal, is how do we love God the way he wants to be loved. And the only way to do that is to know the Old Testament, because that's where God tells us how to love him, how to worship him. And for us to do it any other way is essentially idolatry, because we've decided we don't like his way. So we're going to do it a different way. We're not doing that. We're going to learn what he wants. We're going to learn what worship is. We're going to learn what love is and obedience. And that's what we're going to do. We're not going to worry about what laws we're following or not following. We're going to look at our heart. Are we following out of love? And are we loving him the way he wants to be loved? Let's find out. Numbers chapter 31. And I'm going to read from the New Living Translation. It's a little bit easier to understand when you're reading it out loud. And it says this. Then the Lord said to Moses, on behalf of the people of Israel, take revenge on the Midianites for leading them into idolatry. After that, you will die and join your ancestors. So Moses said to the people, choose some men and arm them to fight the Lord's war of revenge against Midian. Now keep in mind, God's saying this. God's saying, go do this. So this, God doesn't have this kind of behavior that we've been taught in church is just not true. God is a loving God, but he's also a vengeful God and a jealous God. So he doesn't allow idolatry to continue unabated forever. So that's kind of where we're at. Uh, so they chose 1,000 men from each tribe of Israel, a total of 12,000 men armed for battle. Then Moses sent them out, 1,000 men from each tribe, and Phinehas, son of Eleazar the priest, led them into battle. They carried along the holy objects of the sanctuary and the trumpets for sounding the charge. They attacked Midian as the Lord had commanded Moses, and they killed all the men. All 5 of the Midianite kings, Evi, Rechem, Zur, Hur, and Reba, died in the battle. They also killed Balaam, son of Beor, with the sword. Then the Israelite army captured the Midianite women and children and seized their cattle and flocks and all their wealth as plunder. They burned all the towns and villages where the Midianites had lived. After that, they gathered the plunder and captives, both people and animals. They brought them all to Moses and to Eleazar, to the priest, and to the whole community of Israel, which was camped on the plains of Moab beside the Jordan River across from Jericho. Moses, Eleazar the priest, and all the leaders of the community went to meet them outside the camp. But Moses was furious with all the generals and captains who had returned from the battle. Why have you let all the women live? He demanded. These are the very ones who followed Balaam's advice and caused the people of Israel to rebel against the Lord at Mount Peor. They are the ones who caused the plague to strike the Lord's people. So kill all the boys and all the women who have had intercourse with a man. Only the young girls who are virgins may live. You may keep them for yourselves. And all of you who have killed anyone or touched a dead body must stay outside the camp for 7 days. You must purify yourselves and your captives on the 3rd and 7th days. Purify all your clothing too, and everything made of leather, goat, hair, or wood. Then Eleazar the priest said to the men who were in battle, The Lord has given Moses this legal requirement. Anything made of gold, silver, bronze, iron, tin, or lead, that is, all metals that do not burn, must be passed through the fire in order to be made ceremonially pure. These metal objects must then be further purified with the water of purification. But everything that burns must be purified by the water alone. On the seventh day, you must wash your clothes and be purified. Then you may return to camp. Another thing we're learning here, too, is how much it took, what it cost literally, physically, to stay in God's presence. And when you lost that, how hard it was to get it back. And we don't pay that price anymore. The price has been paid, but we don't pay it. And I think that's why I get frustrated when Christians kind of halfway worship and halfway go to church and halfway read their Bible or pray. It's because the barriers to it that have been removed for us are huge. We don't even realize how easy it is now versus then to be in God's presence. So that's what we're learning here. So, and the Lord said to Moses, you and Eleazar the priest and the family leaders of each tribe are to make a list of all the plunder taken in the battle, including the people and animals. Then divide the plunder into two parts and give half to the men who fought the battle and half to the rest of the people. From the army's portion, first give the Lord his share of the plunder, one of every 500 of the prisoners and of the cattle, donkeys, sheep, and goats. Give this share of the army's half to Eleazar the priest as an offering to the Lord. From the half that belongs to the people of Israel, take one of every 50 of the prisoners and of the cattle, donkeys, sheep, goats, and other animals. Give this share to the Levites who are in charge of maintaining the Lord's tabernacle. So Moses and Eleazar the priest did as the Lord commanded Moses. The plunder remaining from everything the fighting men had taken totaled 675,000 sheep and goats, 72,000 cattle, 61,000 donkeys, and 32,000 virgin girls. Half of the plunder was given to the fighting men. It totaled 337,500 sheep and goats, of which 675 were the Lord's share. 36,000 cattle, of which 72 were the Lord's share, 30,500 donkeys, of which 61 were the Lord's share, and 16,000 virgin girls, of whom 32 were the Lord's share. Moses gave all the Lord's share to Eleazar the priest, just as the Lord had directed him. Half of the plunder belonged to the people of Israel, and Moses separated it from the half belonging to the fighting men. It totaled 337,500 sheep and goats, 36,000 cattle, 30,500 donkeys, and 16,000 virgin girls. From the half share given to the people, Moses took one of every 50 prisoners and animals and gave them to the Levites, who maintained the Lord's tabernacle. All of this was done as the Lord had commanded Moses. Then all the generals and captains came to Moses and said, we, your servants, have accounted for all the men who went out to battle under our command. Not one of us is missing. So we are all presenting the items of gold we captured as an offering to the Lord from our share of the plunder: armbands, bracelets, rings, earrings, and necklaces. This will purify our lives before the Lord and make us right with him. So Moses and Eleazar the priest received the gold from all the military commanders, all kinds of jewelry and crafted objects, and all the gold that the generals and captains presented as a gift to the Lord weighed about 420 pounds. All the fighting men had taken some of the plunder for themselves, so Moses and Eleazar the priest accepted the gifts from the generals and captains and brought the gold to the tabernacle as a reminder to the Lord that the people of Israel belonged to him. So it's kind of a long chapter. It's got a lot in it, but it also helps us understand when the Lord tells us to do something. It's not our job to understand the why necessarily. It's to understand the who. Who told us to do it? Well, if God said do it, go do it. That's the goal. And sometimes we don't like the outcome. And some of these military commanders felt that way. It's like they didn't want to kill some of the women. Well, God said all, the ones that were not virgins, kill them all. Get rid of them, because that will help prevent idolatry in the future. You don't want to leave sin somewhere in your house or in your vicinity. It's like, I'm just going to leave it over there but not touch it. It's like, no, get rid of it, get it all the way out, and then you don't have to worry about it as much. So this chapter really covers the holy war against the Midianites. Because of their allegiance with Moab, and leading the Hebrews into idol worship, that's why God decided to take them out. So the Midianite women got the attention of the Hebrew men and persuaded them to help or to take part in their worship of Chemosh, Chemosh. So Jehovah sent a plague that killed 24,000 of the Hebrews. It ended when a priest named Phinehas had killed a Hebrew man. We read about that in the last chapter. So the Lord considered this atonement for the national sin of apostasy and idolatry. So when Israel is led astray, Israel is punished, and then retribution against those who did the leading away. So you lead people into sin, they may suffer the consequences or be punished sooner, but you're going to be punished. You're going to be held responsible for whatever consequences of leading others into sin. So, which also alternative means there's a blessing when you lead them into the kingdom. So lead them to Christ. Can't save them. Only he can. I've never said anything else other than that, but we can lead them to Christ. Okay, so this will be the last major battle for Moses, because he says, once you're done that, then you'll be gathered to your ancestors. So we want the God that our minds prefer, instead of the one who is. So we say the God of the Old Testament has changed into the God of the New Testament because we're just more comfortable with that, and this is really both the cause and definition of the word idolatry. We've changed who God is, we think, in our minds. We've created this idol because we don't like his bad characteristics, what we consider bad. Like, I'm against killing anybody. Well, God's not against killing pedophiles, murderers, so you're against God if you're against killing anybody for any reason. That seems pretty simple to me, but we like the Jesus of the New Testament that we consider is all about love. But Jesus had his moments too. And when he comes back, it's not going to be all about love. It's going to be about vengeance. So let's keep going. An idol is the physical image of a god, and that comes from the mind of men. You can't physically make it until you conceive it. So it's molded and it's assigned attributes according to human philosophies and characteristics and even desires, the way we make some of these things. So when we worship these attributes and characteristics instead of the God of the Holy Scriptures, that's idol worship. I tend to pick on the Catholics sometimes, but when you have these statues and all these things that if I knocked one of them down, I would get jumped and beaten to a pulp, that means we're kind of idolizing it. We're worshiping that. We've raised its value somehow, some way. And God says he's not for that. He's not for things taking the place of him. And I think we got to look at some of that stuff. So the worst slaughtering is yet to happen. It's in our future whenever all of that, we'll see nearly 250,000 Assyrian soldiers dying overnight as they plan to overthrow Jerusalem. We read in Revelation that our Savior returns and leads the armies of God as an invincible warrior chief. In a final war to end all wars, why do we think he's going to come back on these clouds and just be loving and hugging if Scripture says something different? Romans explains that the Lord will treat Jew and Gentile the same and subject them to the same grace and in destruction. In Romans 2:5 it says this, but because of your stubbornness and unrepentant heart, you are storing up wrath for yourself in the day of wrath and revelation of the righteous judgment of God, who will render to every man according to his deeds. To those who, by perseverance in doing good, seek for glory and honor and immortality, eternal life, but for those who are selfishly ambitious and do not obey the truth, which is the Bible, the Torah, the whole Bible, but obey unrighteousness, wrath, and indignation. There will be tribulation and distress for every soul of man who does evil, of the Jew first and also to the Greek. But glory and honor and peace to every man who does good, to the Jew first and also to the Greek. So that's in Romans, that's New Testament. And God's literally saying those who do good to the Jew and the Greek will get blessings, and those who don't won't. They'll get destruction. So the Hebrew men accepted the Midianite women. The crime is adultery, but the law says that the penalty is death for adultery. So after the Lord dealt with his own people, he then turned to those who intentionally drew God's people away from him. So whether they knew it or not, that was the penalty for adultery, was death. So they didn't have a choice whether to kill all of these people, because that's what God said to do. So they are to accomplish this holy war as he orders it, because otherwise they're in sin because they're disobeying God. So the Lord ordered that Phinehas, son of Eleazar, the high priest, is to be the war priest. He's to lead them out. So he basically was kind of like the chaplain. He would there to do his priestly service. So verse 7 states that the Israelites took the field against Midian and annihilated them. There is a principle here that God's showing us. When the Lord sends his armies into the battle and they behave as he ordered them to behave, it's really for the sake of humans to simply witness what Jehovah has already decided for his glory and good, and it's demonstrated. But if we're obedient, no matter what we face, it's going to be done, and we don't have to worry about it. Where we get caught up is when this seems strange. I don't know if we should do it this way. So the Israelites killed every male in the northern Transjordan region. All the descendants of Midian were not exterminated. Balaam, the Mesopotamian sorcerer who King Balak hired to curse Israel for him, was also put to death. Obviously, he must have come back. He should have stayed away, but for some reason he came back, and we read that he is put to death. It was normal to expand one's own tribe by seizing the women and children. That you just kind of absorbed them. It also shows that a genealogically pure within Israel was impossible. So sometimes we hear that it's like we want the Hebrew blood to be pure. Some hardcore Zionists kind of feel that way, but it was already messed up. So there's no such thing as it being pure, because that's just 38 years in the desert of absorbing other peoples. It was no longer pure. So why was Moses so angry? Because these were the women who led the Hebrew men astray. And as a result, 24,000 Israelites were slain by God at one time. So Balaam may not have issued an official curse, but he cursed them by his plan to infiltrate Israel with pagan women. It happened anyway. So only women involved in apostasy should die. So the killing of the boy children was a little harder to take. Yet it is typical for the Arab, because it was a male child's duty to avenge the death of the father. So you did it out of convenience, and it just it worked out better for your tribe. So back in verse 13, we're told that Moses and Eleazar left the camp to go out and greet the returning army. This was to keep defilement from entering the camp. If they'd have waited for them, then once they came into the camp would have become defiled, because they were unclean because they had touched death and been around it. And the people captured were unclean, so they have that 7-day period of cleansing before they can come on to the camp or come into the camp. Verse 22 begins a list of metals that were confiscated in Midian. The earthenware had to be destroyed because it was porous, so it would soak up things. You couldn't make it clean. So the purification process means basically passing it through a fire. Most traditional Jewish households will follow the procedure to this day for Passover and the Feast of Matzah. They'll just pass it through a flame. So the 12,000 soldiers get to keep half of the booty that they all recovered. So the other half was given to the remaining 3 million Israelites. The soldiers got the biggest share of what they gained. And then the civilians received a little something. In our day, soldiers get the least. They're the lowest paid, the lowest supplied, and everything else. Back in God's way, the soldiers were taken care of first. We should probably return to that. So Levites got 10 times as much as the priest, since there were 10 times as many Levites as priests. And the upper Transjordan is a really good pasture land, so it was looking really good. And then the last 7 verses, we get the example of godly leadership. Not one Israelite soldier was killed or missing. They turned over their entire personal portion to the priesthood in gratitude because they all survived. So we see this growing understanding of who God is and what God expects of them. And they're trying to live it out. And God expects so much from human leaders that we should set the pace on those behind us. And he expects a lot from us, and that's a good thing. So that's chapter 20 or 31 of the book of Numbers. Next time we'll cover chapter 32 because that's how Numbers work. God bless. Love God, love people, and change the world.